Hello, and welcome to the Dead Man Walking Podcast. I'm your host, Repeatedly Dead Fred, author of the medical trauma memoir, The Summer I Died 20 Times, which is what happened to me. And that's how I got the nickname, Repeatedly Dead Fred. Today, I am here with the ever amazing and ever smiling Michelle Glogovac, who to be honest, you smile more than any person I think I've ever met.
I appreciate that.
Yeah. Is that a genetic thing? Were your parents like this?
No, I wouldn't. No, I smile. It's just me. Yeah.
No.
I'm pretty happy go lucky. I can have the non-smiling face, but yeah, for the
Uh-oh.
most
Okay.
part, I am. Yeah. Don't get around me then. No, for the most part, I am always smiling, and someday those wrinkles will all come in and show how much I smiled, but those are good wrinkles.
hmm So I met Michelle last week or 2 weeks ago on a common podcast with Hector Santa Sebastian, who runs
Yes.
the Amplify Media Group and teaches people about podcasts. And in a way, I guess you do too. So you have your little niche, and I had never heard of anybody doing your little niche. And plus, you had a book coming out. So I said, "Hey, I would like Michelle on the Dead Man Walking podcast." So this is how you came to be. So Michelle, why don't you tell us a little bit about your very unique business, and we'll go from there.
Sounds good. I am Michelle Glogovac, as you said. I am the podcast matchmaker and the CEO and founder of the MLG Collective, a podcast publicity agency, and author of the upcoming book, How to Get on Podcasts. I pitch clients to be interviewed on podcasts, but I don't just pitch them. I also create unique speaking topics for them, branded media kits. I coach them through the interview process, go over what hosts are going through to produce a episode. And that's also what the book is completely about. It gives you the behind the scenes look on what a podcast host is up to, because I feel like a lot of guests don't fully understand the amount of work and effort that goes into producing a single episode. And so I wanted to highlight that for guests, as well as teach them how to repurpose their interviews into greater marketing content, because I believe that posting in your Instagram stories for 24 hours is not a proper way to say thank you to a podcast host, nor is it going to get you the ROI that everyone is looking for when they're doing podcast interviews.
I think that's a huge one. And I have to admit, I've got a steep learning curve on that. And as someone who also just put out a book um, and has my own podcast and has guested on hundreds of, I had no idea how much work was involved in this.
On both sides, if you're a really good host, if you're a host and you want to grow your show, then there's a lot that goes into not just recording and throwing it out there, but the editing, the creating graphics and copy and show notes and all of those things, on top of doing it more and more so that you can repurpose your own podcast episodes. But then if you're wanting to be interviewed, there's all of the research that goes into, which podcast should I pitch myself to? How do I pitch myself? What are the topics I should be doing? How do I even get a hold of a podcast host and then show up for the interview? But then what happens once the recording stops? Is that it? Is that enough? No, it's not. More work goes into it so that you can promote the episode as well and repurpose it into greater marketing content. So on both sides, there's a lot of work that goes into it if you want to actually see it grow and add value to the listeners.
Mm-hmm. So there was an old rule when I was teaching in college that for every hour you were presenting in class, you were doing a minimum of 3 hours of prep. And then if you had projects to mark, you were also doing another 3 hour to one ratio. And I'm starting to see that as well. So,
yes, for a 30-minute podcast episode, my editor and I figured out it takes 4 hours of prep work that goes into it. If you're editing it and, doing it really the right way that you should, yes, it's a lot. And I think that people who go on an interview don't know that. It's still, podcasting is the wild, wild west. There's no rhyme or reason. There's no rules. There's no best standards. And so people just show up and do it. Anyone who has an iPhone or any kind of phone, a microphone, not even a microphone, can create a podcast. So anyone can do it. Doesn't mean that everyone should be doing it, but it's got such a low barrier entry that anyone can. And yet, if you have a show, you should be putting in that work and that effort. It doesn't cost a lot of money to create a podcast, but you can still make it a really quality show by putting in that effort and that time.
Yeah, especially if you're a little bit older and you've grown up watching, TV, late night TV. The host does nothing. Like, they don't even make up their own questions. They're given to them by their staff.
Yeah.
And they don't do post-production. They don't do distribution. They don't do any promo. So,
they don't even do their own jokes.
Yeah.
I know this in college. There was the guy who lived above me. His father was a joke writer for Jay Leno and would send us his jokes in the morning and say, do you find this funny? And we'd email him back our thoughts. And then you could watch later that week and hear the jokes that he had written.
That is hilarious. Is the guy still alive? Do you know?
I believe he is. Yeah. I haven't seen otherwise. Yeah.
Okay. A few weeks ago, I had on Mark Breslin, who founded the Yuck Yucks Comedy Club in Canada. It's the biggest chain of comedy clubs in North America. And so he's worked with all these joke writers and everything. This is just a total tangent. But
that's fun.
It was. I found it was a great interview and learning about all the history of stand-up comedy and everything. And we talked about Jay Leno and how all these great comics, for the most part, have their own writing staffs, and there's a few that don't. Like Jerry Seinfeld, for the most part, writes his own jokes. Stephen Wright, for the most part, writes his own jokes. Rodney Dangerfield wrote his own jokes, if anybody's old enough to remember him.
Yeah.
But he started off writing out jokes for everyone else. He couldn't get on stage, but he wrote for everybody else.
How funny.
Yeah. Anyway, back to you. So how did you come up with this idea? Like, something must have happened that you saw there was this niche for you to take advantage of. And then how'd you get it going?
Some of it was just falling into it. For 18 years, I sold jet fuel to corporate flight departments, and I was late. I sold jet fuel to corporate flight departments. So I worked with big corporations, celebrities. I got to meet all kinds of very interesting people. And I did that for 18 years because I needed a part-time job in college and I could walk to the airport, and I didn't have a car quite yet. So they put me on salary when I graduated, and I had salary and benefits. And so while all my friends were moving back home, I was like, cool, I get to stay, working, and I don't have to move back in with my mom and wonder, what am I going to do? So then 18 years later, I was still selling jet fuel. And then I was laid off, and by then I was married with 2 kids, and I really felt like I wasn't doing something that was going to make the world a better place for my kids. It was like I became a mom, and I wanted things to, just be better for them. And so being laid off was that blessing in disguise, where you're like, oh, this is horrific. And you go through all the emotions. And a woman from my birthing class had said to me that there is a life and business coach who's launching a podcast, and she thinks that I could probably benefit from listening. I didn't know how to even listen to a podcast. This was 2018. Yeah. I had an iPhone, didn't know that the purple button was how you listen to it. So I started listening, and this woman was talking about how we all have a purpose and a passion. And I was like, yeah, I believe that, but how do you find it? Like, how do you figure it out? And so I was posting on social media that I was listening to this show. I was on this quest to figure out what it is I want to do. And she ended up reaching out to me and said, you obviously like what I'm putting out there. Do you want to pitch me to be on other podcasts? And I was like, this is a thing. I had no idea, but yeah, let's try it. And I am one of those people who I dive in. I learn as much as I can about anything. My stepkids call me the Google Queen. So I learned everything that goes into a podcast. I don't like the editing part. So I learned how to do it in order to not do it. I started producing her show. I launched my own show, but I fell in love with the pitching part because I loved the ability to share other people's stories just so that it resonates with the listeners. I love that podcasts are free to listen to, that there is a topic on literally everything. You can, if you want to cry, I'm sure you can find a story that'll make you cry. If you want to laugh, there's comedy, there's true crime, there's, how to build your business, how to market your business. There's literally a topic on everything for anyone, and it's free to listen to. So I really connected with that. And in reflecting over the past 6 years of, well, how did I go from selling jet fuel to pitching people to be on podcasts? It's all coming down to the people and the relationships. I didn't love planes and jet fuel. That, jet fuel is like, it's gas, right? But I loved the people that I worked with. I loved the flight departments. I could tell you whose anniversary was coming up, who was having a kid, who had a grandkid, when their birthday was, because I loved the people. And that's truly what has translated over to what I do now. Is I am my client's number one fan. I tell them that up front. I will believe in their story. I listen to their story. If I don't believe in it, then how am I going to pitch it? So whether they have a book, it's their story, it's part of their business. We go over that and I know about it in depth. Some of these things are like therapy sessions where they're sharing parts of their story that they've never shared before, or they say, you know what, I don't want this to come out, but you should know this. Because it is part of my story, and it's really relating with them and wanting to help others by sharing their story. So that's how the two careers have connected, and why I just love what I do. I wake up every morning excited to pitch, clients and to bring on new ones and listen to their stories. And I feel very lucky because I love what I do.
So who was your first client?
It was this podcast host, Kelsey Murphy. She is the host of Whiskey and Work podcast. And I pitched her to be on a number of shows. Then I also produced her show.
And is she still going?
She is still going. Yes. Yeah.
That's amazing. I find I get pitched by people, and every podcast seems to be a top 1% worldwide podcast. Have you noticed that?
Yeah.
I don't know where they're getting their metrics.
From Listen Notes. ListenNotes.com is a free website that you can type in any podcast name and it will tell you their quote global ranking. And what that really comes down to is, are they consistent in the shows that they produce? Are they showing up? It's really, when people say I'm in the top 10%, I'm like, yeah, that sounds great, but like I'm in the top 2% and my show is not big, right? I'm like, I know what I put out there, but it's the fact that my show's been going since 2019 and every single week there's an episode. So your ranking goes up by the longevity and consistency that you are putting out your episodes.
Not by the millions
Not by
of
downloads. Nope.
Yeah. That's funny. That's a funny system.
That's why I say it's still the wild, wild west. There's no rhyme or reason behind it. And, last month when Apple did their iOS update, they accidentally, I believe, they scrapped all of the podcast subscription. So if you were subscribing to a podcast, the episode would automatically download every time a new one came out. That feature went away with their update. So a lot of shows saw decreases in their downloads. And then there's other websites. I subscribe to Podchaser, which tells me how many monthly listeners there are. But then I could see that the correlation between my own show and my host Libsyn telling me what I'm getting downloaded versus what Podchaser is, there was a discrepancy in that. So there's really no rhyme or reason when it comes to how do you calculate it besides, going directly to your host as a podcaster. But then the rest of us don't have access to that. We have access to something like Podchaser to tell us what the monthly listens are, but it's not always accurate. So it's a tough one to know where everybody stands.
Is that a subscription like a
They
paid
have
subscription?
they have a free version where you can search podcasts, and then I have the subscription so that I can see monthly downloads, demographics, those kinds of things. Yeah. But in my agency, we look at all of those different metrics, as well as then go look at how many reviews on Apple do they have? How many Instagram followers do they have? Because in this day and age, you know that you can buy followers. You can also buy reviews. So there are shows that might have, a
Wait,
million.
what?
Yes, you can buy
People
reviews.
cheat?
Yeah. Imagine that.
That's
Yes.
shocking.
So that's why we look at all of these different components to see, are they cheating? Where are they cheating? So that the
Mhm.
client knows, is this a big show? Oh, well, it says it's got, 1.5 thousand reviews. Yeah, but they've got 200 followers. Like, something doesn't match up here. So we give
Mhm.
them the whole picture. And then I have some clients who go, well, tell me, is it a good show to go on? And I'll go, oh, I'll give you my honest opinion and hear all the numbers that back why I'm saying what I'm saying. So, and are
Mhm.
they consistent? Are they putting out an episode? It doesn't have to be every week, but are they doing once a month and staying consistent with that? Once every other week? What is the consistency rate in all of it? So we look at everything.
So I think those would probably be the great numbers you would need if you're trying to um, attract a sponsor.
Yeah. Yes, because the sponsors want to know how many downloads are you getting. They'll pay per download. That's how all of the monetary stuff is figured out.
Mhm. And do you do that as well? Do you
I
also
do
help?
not. No, no. I've done enough sponsor stuff back in the day with networking events and those kinds of
Mhm.
things. So no, I'm good. I'm
Okay.
happy to let clients know how to, obtain sponsors or send them a sample deck. But no, I'm good on not having to reach out to companies and ask for money.
Mhm. What's slightly off topic, but what's the most bizarre sponsor you've connected one of your clients with?
I don't think that I have one. No, I don't think no, sponsor wise, I don't think I've had a bizarre one.
Mhm. Okay. I just thought maybe. Okay. Potentially. Okay. So who would be a client you took on that you thought hmm, borderline, and I guess maybe you don't want to name them, uh, but you know, and they just exploded. You just found people wanted them like you never expected them to.
Um, there was one more recently, and I won't name because yeah, I
Yeah.
was kind of like, really? Had a book come out that was self-published, and the book was okay. It
Mhm.
wasn't something that I would have been like, wow, I want to promote this left and right. Like I understood it. There were good messages within it, but it wasn't like oh, we have to, spread the word massively. And
Mhm.
yet I don't know if it was the book or actually the topics that I created around the book that yes, this individual really exploded what left and right interviews. I think we booked 30 within 3 months and then it
Wow.
continues to go on. Yeah, it was a very big one that the topics, it was really around the topics. It wasn't even the book. And yet the client came to me to promote the book, but it was, let's pull apart pieces of the book. And that's what we're going to promote. And I think that's really what helped.
Very interesting. So, do you book them only on podcasts, or do you find other media starts to come to you and ask to get them
Uh,
on theirs?
for the most part, I only do podcasts, and it is the clients who will actually say to me, hey, this media reached out, or this journalist, or I saw this. What do you think? I do have relationships with some journalists that will say, hey, do you have a client that fits this? Because we've worked together in the past. And in that situation, I will connect the client or former client with
Mhm.
that journalist, because I feel even though if our contract is up, I've already done the legwork up front, whether it's a podcast host or, some other form of media. So if they come back and say, yes, we want to interview your client or former client, then I still connect the two and make sure it happens.
Nice. So, what sort of contracts do you enter into? Are
I
they,
do,
time based or
there's six
numbers of
months or
interviews?
yeah, 6 months or 12 months. And then I also
Okay.
do podcast book tours. So usually it's prior to a book launch. Sometimes it is after a launch has happened where the
Mhm.
author has said, you know what, my publicist didn't get me enough or didn't get me anywhere. What can you do? And then we'll create a podcast book tour after the book has been launched. And those usually last between 3 and 4 months. And that also gives me time to read the book entirely before we
Mhm.
even start pitching. The goal is for regular clients to have at least 3 podcast interviews a month. For podcast book tours, it is the goal of a minimum of 15 podcast interviews while we're together.
Wow. That's a lot of work. I mean,
Yes. Yeah.
not so much when I'm doing the interviews, but when I'm being interviewed, I find them much more exhausting um, than when I'm doing the interviews.
Yes, it is. It's a lot. And when you do them back to back, over the course of a week and days, and I've noticed myself, I'm like, okay, yeah, I'm smiling all the time, but then you're going, oh wow, I'm exhausted after all of these
Mhm.
interviews. And yeah, it's definitely time consuming, but also it takes a lot out of you.
Yeah, I have a friend who has at least 3 podcasts going of her own. Plus, she gets invited on 2 per week,
Wow,
and she's been doing this probably at a pace from 2019,
that's a
and
lot.
she runs her own community, and yeah, it's makes her husband lunch. It's just a crazy schedule, but
It's a lot. I try to block certain days where I know I'm going to do interviews these days. Normally, I don't do Mondays or Fridays because I like to keep that just plain work days, no client meetings, no podcast interviews for myself or my show. But
mhm,
sometimes, like today, it just works out better. But to do 3 or more in a day is a lot.
mhm. Yeah, when I started booking my podcast to as a host, I thought I heard a story that what's her name? The race car Danica Patrick. When
Hmm.
she started her podcast, she recorded like something like 80 podcasts before she put anything out because she knew she had such a crazy schedule that
Yeah.
she never knew when she would be available. So she would always have something in the hopper. Uh, how true that is, I don't know. But I sort of went that method as well because of my health problems. So I never knew when I was going to be in the hospital or not in the hospital and stuff like that. So I've still
Yeah.
got about 40 to release.
Oh, wow. That's a
So now
lot. That's some
with
batch
you,
recording.
yeah. So now with you, it's 41 and help me.
That's
I
great
need
though.
help.
I love batching before summer because I've got 2 kids. So, we're going to have summer
Mhm.
vacation and then they're home. And so I try to batch at least a month in advance. So I usually have like 4 or so, but then I have a lot planned out of what's to come, what does the calendar look like? So at
Mhm.
least a month in advance is what I hope for.
Mhm. So when you're booking off for yourself, how is your business running? Like, how are you finding people for your clients?
I do have one teammate who is
Mhm.
doing some research for me as well, but it's the 2 of us. We are constantly working every day. There's a Rolodex now, after 6 years of shows that we've pitched to that we know we can just reach out and say, hey, this is the newest client. What do you think? We think it's a good match.
Mhm.
And so the pitch doesn't have to be as formal. We don't have to go back into looking at what episodes have they produced and relate to them
Sure.
because we already know them. The relationship's already established. So those are the easier ones to pitch to, but we're constantly looking at new ones every single day because new
Mhm.
ones are showing up every single day. So there's a never ending supply of podcasts to pitch to.
Okay. So, as somebody who wants to hire you, how much work do I have to do to be in a position to work with you?
You don't have to know too much about your topics. I
Mm-hmm.
send you an onboarding form. It's a Google form in which I
Mm-hmm.
ask you all of the questions. What do you want to be known for? What do you think you're known for? What are your goals?
Mm-hmm.
What's your business? What's your current bio? And then I go on my side and start stalking you. I Google you. I look up, where have you been featured that you didn't actually tell me you were featured? You'd be amazed
Mm-hmm.
how often I find interviews that clients go, oh, I forgot about that one.
Mm-hmm.
And so I go and I do a deep dive on, who is it that you are to the outside world? What is it that you have put out there? And I've had one, she ended up not being a client because we went through this process and I gave her some topics that I felt were aligned with what she was putting out there. And there was one specific topic that she said to me, where would you get this? Why would you think that I could speak on this? And she was really heated about this one topic. I said, well, actually, if you go to your homepage, that's word for word what it says you are known for. And she was taken aback completely. She was like, what? I'm like, it's on your homepage. So if you don't want to be known for it, if you don't want to speak on it, then you should probably remove it from your homepage. But
Wow.
it's really it can be as simple as that of what is it that you're putting out there that you don't even realize you're putting out into the world to say this is who I am. So
Mm-hmm.
really it's filling out the Google form, and then we have an hour-long Zoom where we talk about all of it, and I take notes and we just go into it. I ask you about your story, and there are parts where you might not feel it's important or relevant, and I'll say, oh, that right there, that is what you need to talk more about, because as a listener, I want to hear more about that. And so
Mm-hmm.
I will recommend, write it on a Post-it, stick it on your computer screen so you can remember that this is part of my story I need to share. And so
Mm-hmm.
it's not that much work on your end, besides the front part of probably a couple of hours putting in to share who you are and what your story is.
Cool. Okay. Can we do a little bit of a shift here
Mm-hmm.
and talk about the big foam board behind you? And I pronounced that correctly. How to get
Yes.
on podcasts. So are you saying it's possible to do this even without hiring you?
It is, because I spill all of my secrets and the secret sauce in the book. I
Mm-hmm.
literally, I give it all away in how to get on podcasts. It comes out January 17th with McGraw-Hill. So it'll be in all the bookstores, Barnes and Noble, Amazon, bookshop.org, all the places. And it starts with, what is a podcast pitch and how it is not baseball that we're talking about.
Mm-hmm.
You get in every chapter, it shares what the podcast host is doing while you're preparing your pitch. It also relates the entire process to a dinner party, because a host's show is really their home, and you're being invited to a dinner party, which is the interview, and how they relate. The entire process relates how you're going to thank your dinner host, with a thank you or a text or a phone call the next day, and how you even repurpose that dinner party by sharing your photos of it around how you're going to do the same thing on a podcast interview. I go through how to create your speaking topics and the different categories that you can use. There's worksheets and exercises. There's templates. There's examples, good and bad, on
Mm-hmm.
media kits, on pitches, on follow-ups. And then I also wrap it up with how you can repurpose all of your interviews into greater marketing content. So it is literally everything that you need to know to create your speaking topics, your media kit, to pitch yourself, to show up as a podcast guest, and then to repurpose the interview.
Yeah, I think I'm pretty weak on repurposing. Those hard words to say again. Good grief. Yeah, that's
Yeah,
something I definitely have to
and
work on.
it's really just a process. If you create a process and then create templates, and I give you templates actually in the book, there's a link, there's a
Mm-hmm.
QR code, so that the graphics are already kind of created for you. You just change the colors and then slide in, a headshot, slide in cover art for the show that you were on, change out the title of the episode, and now you already have the graphic done for you. So you can repurpose it that way. And it's really, a checklist. And that's also, I created a Trello board that I use for clients that I'm giving access to that template as well. And it has the checklist in it of, okay, it's gone live. Have you, post it on your website, post it on Instagram, post it on, Facebook. It has all of those checklists built in.
Mm-hmm. Sorry, what's a Trello board?
Trello board is an online project management tool. It is free.
Okay.
And it's kind of like a giant bulletin board where they're almost like Post-its. And so I've created different columns for you where one is the podcast that you've researched, and then you move the card over to when you've sent the first pitch. And you can write yourself notes of, I sent the pitch on, this date. And then there's a second column for I've sent a follow-up. And then if you get a host who says, yes, I want to book you, and you have the link, but you haven't booked it, you move that to waiting on dates. And then once you've booked it, there's a column. And then when it goes live, you then have another column, and you add the live link into it so that it houses every podcast that you've pitched to, you've researched, you've been on, as well as if you get the dreaded no's or follow-up laters, there's columns for all of that.
Amazing stuff. More admin. I guess because I suck at admin, it doesn't surprise me that I'm not so good at repurposing things, because it's all part of a flow.
Yeah.
Oh boy, I need somebody like you. Okay. So if somebody wants to get hold of you, how do they do that?
They can go to my website, themlgcollective.com, or also michelleglogovac.com, which is more particular to me. But the MLG Collective has everything on the podcast book tour, on podcast pitching. It also has a lot of free resources on how to be a great guest and show up, where you should be repurposing your podcast as well. I'm also on Instagram at Michelle Glogovac, and I'm also on Threads and TikTok and everywhere else. And on Instagram, Threads, and TikTok right now, I'm doing 50 tips counting down to how to get on podcasts. So there's a tip every single day that goes along with the book.
Good grief. How do you have time to work?
The work gets in there too. I work nights and on weekends too.
And you parent, and you drop off kids on foggy days to school.
Yes.
Oh, this is fascinating. I think you created a really good niche for you, because I know, there's matchmaking sites on Facebook and off Facebook, for finding shows to be on and finding guests. And they just seem so inefficient to me.
It's a lot of copy and paste on, when you find a matchmaking site where they're just throwing spaghetti at the wall. Most times the pitches that go out are the same one to every host, per client, where every pitch that I'm sending out is different for each host. Every client has a skeleton pitch of a few sentences, because they're not going to change who they are, but every pitch that goes out is unique to the host that we're sending it to.
I know on one site that I used to frequent, the host would say, I expect to get back to you in like 6 to 8 weeks.
That's a long time.
Yeah. Like, what are you doing? And, most of the times they don't get back to you. So,
right.
And I think your service eliminates a lot of that, because you already have the relationships with people, and they're not going to blow you off.
No, if we have a relationship, then they'll give us, even if it's a no, they'll tell us the no, so we don't have to wait around.
Well, Michelle, I think this has been very fascinating, and I think a lot of people could benefit from your service, the MLG Collective. How'd you get that name, by the way?
It's my initials. Michelle Layler Glogovac. Middle name is my maiden name.
Okay. And Collective, where did that come from?
It just kind of came, bouncing off ideas of what should it be, and Collective just seemed like the right way to go. Doesn't have to be agency. The MLG agency just didn't sound good. The MLG Collective, it just rolled better.
Works. It just works. Okay. Thank you so much. Anything you want to leave the audience with before we close out?
No, just thank you so much. I had a wonderful time getting to talk to you 2 weeks in a row now. So
Mhm.
thank you. I appreciate it.
My pleasure. And How to Get on Podcast comes out January 17th, and it'll be at all the major sellers. And I'm guessing, is there an audiobook as well?
There will be an audiobook. Yes.
Okay. That seems to be big.
Yes.
Okay. So look for How to Get on Podcasts, especially if you're an aspiring podcaster, even an experienced podcaster. I'm sure you can do better than what you're already doing if you hook up with Michelle and get a little more structure to what you're doing. So, Michelle, thank you so much. And I wish you much success.
Thank
And I
you.
hope you have a great day.
Thanks.
You're welcome. Bye bye.
Bye.
And to the audience, thank you so much for tuning in to the Dead Man Walking podcast. Please like, subscribe, hit the notification button, check out Michelle's sites, share, do all the cool things that the cool kids tell you to do these days on podcasts. Much appreciate you coming by, and have a great week. Bye bye.